really here to talk about football because I think it's a really interesting one, and like you said, you got the pros coming back, and I'm kind of hearing what's happening at training camp, and everything seems good for now, aside from that guy from the Seahawks who tried to smuggle in a woman or something like that. But the college situation is very interesting. I'm glad Eric Kozlowski's on because we talked to him before and his concerns. And there's two things. One, you're going to have some conferences, I guess, that are going to try to come back, and then you're going to have these conferences who are deferring to spring. And what happens in between, and even if you go to spring, I saw some of the schedules said they're going to play January, February, and I'm like, isn't it pretty cold in some states in January and February? I don't know how that's going to look. Do they go to an indoor stadium? Who knows? So logistically, I'm a little bit at odds of how this is going to work. And I don't know what experience or what you guys have heard. I've talked to, staff. I've talked to athletes that are going back, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm in residence now, and we kind of go on groups, and then full camp's going to start very soon, and we don't know what's going to happen." So it's really strange right now, and I'll get Eric to comment first, and then we'll get all of you to kind of add your experiences as well and what you're hearing and what do you think we should do. So how are things going with you guys, Eric?
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. We got one practice in before our conference shut us down. We felt all along that we would be shut down. By shut down, I mean we're just not practicing or playing football. We're in a strength and conditioning phase, and this week, we ran it every day but one, and next week we'll go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Coaches are trying to figure out what's available, legal, allowed as far as walkthroughs, and so it's still working. The football coaches are off until the 24th, so we're just training and rehabbing back at our place. It was a stressful, probably last 3 weeks to a month or since we last spoke. We were given a lot of responsibility to at the last minute to try to write our return to sport protocol. And Ernie Settlemeyer and I, another guy on the football staff, poured our guts into it, meeting with the coaches and the team docs, and sharing what we talk about here, meeting with the other service academies. And 2 weeks before the season start, we looked at each other and says, we can't do this. We just cannot manage it. And I think talking around I've got buddies that work for the NHL and NBA and the NFL, and they can handle it because they can do a true bubble. And I even know I may have been a little flamboyant at times, thinking, hey, we're the Air Force Academy, we have our own bubble, but it's not an open bubble. I mean, it's probably better than most schools because all our kids at least sleep in the same place, but they're still allowed to leave, and there's still faculty coming on. There's still all coaches, strength conditioning, and ATs coming back onto base. So it's not really a closed bubble, but just looking at the amount of things that had to be done to try to keep our athletes and coaches and staff safe. And I say the last two, coaches and staff, because I don't think many people outside this room really understand that. I mean, maybe the most at-risk staff is the strength conditioning coach. He is with them every single day in the weight room, warming them up outside. And next is probably just the medical staff, the ATs. We don't have the finances, the resources, or the manpower to appropriately do it. And it was scary every day thinking we don't have daily scanning figured out, daily screening. So we don't have an app doing our thing was they've been tested. We know they went through a ROM, which is our little quarantine or isolation phase. They've tested. They're allowed to come down on their honor if they were feeling okay. And that was it. Now, when they come into the athletic training room, we would ask them the typical questions and scan them for their temperature. But outside the athletic room for all the sports, we didn't have any screening for all our sports. And we didn't know how we get beyond that. We closed our recovery pool because we couldn't manage that either with the amount of volume that we need to do. So the training room was down to 15 people. 15 athletes could come in before or after practice. And after practice the first day, and I'm kind of bouncing around here, but hopefully you'll keep up. But it felt like the training was empty. It felt like an after a morning summer lift how few people were in the training room and how many people actually needed to come in that were waiting for us or that actually didn't get care. Now, it's early in the season. They did not need much, but we'd had a pretty good success with regeneration and recovery between Coach Getty and our place of using the pools, cold tubs, active movement, whatever, boots, complex units, whatever you want. We had a pretty good rhythm down with that. And we had to turn guys away and say, sorry, we're loaded with this room. And honestly, the room felt empty. So we must have 60, 90 guys in there at the end of practice during the regular season. But to go back, we looked at our program, just trying to move people around the locker room and keep 6 feet distance between them in the locker room. One side of the locker room is bigger, more the varsity side, the JV side. Just to backtrack there, we started the summer with 238 guys on the football roster. And we have 5 ATs. And until this summer, basically Coach McGettigan was the only full-time staff strength conditioning coach for the football team. He's had some interns. So there's not another Division I team in the country that does what Matt McGettigan does, with both success, getting guys strong, making sure that they move, building athletes, but with just basically one guy and a couple interns that rotate through. So I just all the respect to the world for Matt and our relationship. But on the JV side of the locker room, if we try to break them into 4 groups, which is kind of a manageable group with that number, we could not keep people 6 feet apart, locker to locker, in the room. Now we limit the time that they're in there, try to move them out, but again, no manpower to do it. The equipment guys are doing their thing, strength conditioning guys are doing their thing, and the ATs are doing theirs, and we all try to get in there a little bit to keep them in and out of the locker room. Now, when I say they're using the locker room, they're picking up their water bottle, dropping their keys, their phone, whatever off in the locker, and supposedly getting out. What that turns into reality, we know athletes, they would come in and they would want to change. They would forget that they're supposed to come down to workout gear. So they're changing, getting their shoes, and it really became unmanageable and a little bit scary if we're talking about, one, getting guys sick, secondarily contact tracing. But 2 weeks before the season started, Coach and I had talked about it. We both didn't feel like we were going to have a season or even we should have a season. Morally and ethically, we shouldn't have a season with how we knew things were going to play out, at least at our place, at our level. I met with, Ernie, who's like I said, on the football staff with me, met with our team docs, met with the head coach and said, I don't think we should play. I'll tell you right now, if you want me to do it, I'll get on Instagram, I'll get on Twitter. And at least at the Air Force Academy, we cannot manage this. Now that being said, we had a few positives early when the kids came back, and up until yesterday, we had no positives on the football team. We've since gotten one on a young guy, so we'll see how that plays out through the weekend with contact tracing. But we had a meeting with administration who understood our need for more manpower. Didn't feel like they could. Nobody wanted to be the first one, right? Whether it was a league or a team to say we shouldn't do this. So they said, we promise you we'll find more manpower. This is 3 weeks later, and we haven't had any new manpower or people reassigned to help us with daily screening, evaluation, anything like that. So we're relieved that we're done. Football practice actually seemed like the one place we had control of a little bit. It was the other thing, the locker room, the transition between locker room, weight room, where we got guys bunched up in the hallway, and there was always one group that had nowhere to go. So they were standing in the hallway talking to each other, mask up, mask down. It was a little frustrating, and really overwhelming, and it wore on us. It made us tired and upset and ready to my buddy at another school said, I'm ready to claim contact tracing, take 14 days off, then say, I don't feel safe coming back to work. And by the time they figure out it'll be 8 weeks, I'll have a new job or I'll be somewhere else. But it's that's kind of where we are right now. Everyone has done their best, I think. I think we moved a little bit slow. And again, finances, resources, and manpower just smoked us. We just couldn't. There's no way. And it's disappointing. I watched the first Hard Knocks the other night, and it was disappointing to see how focused they were, everybody in the department, just towards football in general, and then towards preparing for COVID, and they had their shit together. And my shoulders are sore from throwing my arms up in the air saying, fuck it. I don't know what to do. So that's where we are. And if you guys have any questions or remarks, I'll talk more. But that's
Yeah.
where we are right now.
I mean, it's really interesting because when everything shut down, I was worried about strength and conditioning not having anything to do, and now it seems like they're going to be the fallback position. Like if we can't practice, now you got to work with the strength coach until further notice. And is that what's going to happen, Eric? Is it going to be you guys come back September, say, and it's just strength and conditioning and maybe the odd practice or walkthrough or distance film session, or what's
Yeah.
going to happen?
So we had a 4-day pause the Monday before practice was supposed to start, where they want us to reevaluate the system. And as you know, the coaches can't miss a day of work with the kids, and I understand it. So it went from can we sit down and actually work on this protocol and this process, but then you take an afternoon out of us because they've got a strength conditioning lift, and we've got to be on site with strength conditioning coaches during their conditioning cycle. And I'd love being there. I'd much rather be there than at the desk or working on paperwork. But our 4 days off turned to a Saturday, Sunday. We had to practice Monday. And I think that's what it's going to be like. I think, at least until the 24th, we're lifting and running 4 days a week. Beyond that, if the league allows us we'll do some walkthrough stuff where the coaches come out and maybe run a session of 11 on 11 walkthrough type stuff. I don't know where we're going to go from there, but right now, our last team meeting with the head coach, we're talking that for the next 4 months, this is what we're going to do: strength condition and maybe some walkthroughs. Who knows if they're going to give us a fall practice, like a spring practice schedule, where you get 15 days where you get in the pads a little bit. I don't think that our coach is interested in that because of the risk factor of injury. I think a walkthrough would be smart and would be okay with him. He'd get enough volume in with that. And like you've heard that, and it's a little silly, I think, for other schools. Our school, our kids get 4 years to play. They if there's an injury or some, not really, we can't say it's sport related. Reality is if it's sports related and they get an injury, they can ask for a turn back year where they leave a semester and come back. Other schools can either petition for a 5th year or even a 6th year and maybe come back for another year. Our guys are going to have to go out in the active duty and graduate, and then they've got to go right to work. So I think the service academy athletes had a little bit rougher than maybe the other schools who have a chance to play 1 more year. We have had several kids that have requested or done a surgery, maybe that they were planning on waiting to the end of the season, and they're going to try to get turned back with the idea of coming back and maybe playing in the spring, which my opinion is not going to happen, and I don't think it's smart for it to happen. But to have that 9th semester, they can come back in the fall and play 1 more year, or if they're sophomore, juniors, have another year, 1 more fall in this semester. But it sure seems like we're gonna strength condition, occasional walkthrough, and they'll probably get some meetings. I got to assume there'll be some hour limits. Summertime we got that 8-hour limit. Right, I think maybe a 12-hour limit might be okay, where they can meet a little bit and either walk through and then make sure to get their strength conditioning in. One thing I'm excited about is our freshmen, who usually don't get a good dose of a movement prep and learning time until the spring. They're going to be ahead of most of these guys because they're getting it right now in August. And also the sophomores that came back this year, who really only got 3 weeks of strength conditioning before we got shut down. So they're a little bit behind, but the freshmen will be ahead of the game. So I think from an injury prevention standpoint and a movement athletic standpoint, we should be better off whenever we play again, whether it's January or next fall, because they're getting the dosage of work that they need that our kids normally don't get until their sophomore year or spring semester.
Does anybody have any questions for Eric before I call on somebody else? Because he's obviously in a unique situation and has a lot of information. Anybody want to ask Eric something specific?
Yeah, where was the training taking place with Coach McGetty? Was it outside, inside?
Our suggestion was outside, of course. He did a phenomenal job. That guy's a rock star. We gave him some parameters, and he got it done, much like I'm sure many of you did. We wanted outside when we had the bigger numbers. Weather doesn't always cooperate with us, so we have an indoor facility. We were allowed to call our indoor facility an outdoor facility because we can open all the doors, 2 garage doors and probably 4 doors on each side. So we didn't have a number restriction when we went to the indoor. things that Matt did to help align. I mean, it was really a work of art that the guys, we'd march them out of the locker room and we'd have a hydration station where we'd fill their water bottle with a pump unit. We didn't want them touching anything early. They would go down to the field, and he had an X at the far end of the field on the sideline where the first guy dropped his cleats, his water bottle, take his flats off, put his cleats on, whatever they needed to do. And everybody from there had a marker, probably 6 to 10 feet away, all the way on both sides of the field. They'd go in, they'd run small, medium, big, or whatever it is, 10 yards apart. On each goal line, he had cones 10 feet apart. So they had a goal with like their zone, like we talked about a couple months ago, that you could stay in your workout lane. And it really worked great. On the way out, same deal. Smalls, get your stuff, march out to your weight room, masked up, flats on, get to the weight room, and it was phenomenal. So we've done both. We've been outside when we can, and with the smaller numbers now, and even with our phase, we call it Phase D. It's analogous to the NCAA Phase 3. We can have more people inside. One thing that we noticed, and maybe you guys did too, we want them in the mask all the time when they're exercising. It didn't take long to figure out, even if you're outside with the mask up, it becomes too saturated. The guys really couldn't breathe, and we allow them to take it down their exercise and try to ask them to put it up when they were at least inside with the dry one, weightlifting. Inside, our rule was that we had masks on all the time. We have 54 platforms. That was kind of what we shot for our limits, around 50, 54 athletes, a few more strength staff in there. Didn't mind not having a spotter. One, because of time constraint. If the rules say you've got to wipe everything down between every lift and you're having a spotter, it would take up too much time for two guys to be on one platform. So one guy off, and it saved time, and that way you just have one cleaning session at the end, assisted by the athletes.
Wow. Like, I'm just sitting here thinking, well, obviously the NCAA isn't publishing these types of protocols for people to follow, the NSCA or the college strength condition, but somebody should say like, hey, this is what Coach McGettigan's doing, or at least give somebody some parameters around, this seems like a common sense approach, but everybody's kind of left up on their own, aren't they, Eric?
Top to bottom, from the top of our country to the bottom of our country, from every league, every sport. It seemed like everybody kind of like, yeah, you just do your thing. And, at our place, football being the biggest sport and the premier sport, the sports med team in charge of writing the protocols and other things within the football staff, whether it's recovery things or it's whatever, we take it personal that we want to lead the way. And so we made our protocols really strict for our return to sport. We could hit most marks, like we talked about. We couldn't do the screening and things we want to do, but as far as when the team was working out, they did everything right. They did what we asked them to do. Unfortunately, some of our other sports turned their protocols in. It was kind of a cut and paste from the guidelines, and they didn't go into how are you going to water these guys? What can they touch? When can they shower? We didn't allow them in the locker room to shower for the first 4 weeks. We got back and we're saying, how can we let them shower? We wanted them to shower up on the hill. We were going to take the risk of any communicable skin disease like that by just keeping them out of the shower room and the locker room as much as we can, because we know that's where they're most commonly packed, within that 6 feet distance that most people feel is difficult. But coach said we got to shower, so we were doing the first few days 90-second to 2-minute showers. They would go in, get a little soap on special spots, and blow the whistle, get your towel, and get out. Some guy, the reality of it is, guys stepped out and didn't want to shower. It's like, I'd rather go to my room where I know I can take a good shower instead of being rushed and hang out here. So there's things that we felt would work out. Every day was a learning situation where we put something we thought would work, like the mask. Let's wear our masks when we're training. It took 2 days for us to say, drop your mask, dudes. It doesn't make sense. You can't breathe. Take your mask down. We're staying 10 feet apart. Let's do it.
Has anybody published any training room guidelines that you've seen around this?
We've shared within colleagues, and there was, the NATA put out some guidelines and NCAA put out the guidelines. That's what we based everything on. But talking to our equipment guys, when they have their equipment fitting session, helmets, shoulder pads, which you're pulling onto a face, slobber, snot, whatever, shoulder pads over you, and sharing that information, sharing that equipment And the equipment room said their organization had put forth zero guidance on how to fit. And like we talked about, let's have some common sense here on what we should do. It's always social distancing. Keep your mask on. 6 feet away. Keep your mask on. Wash your hands. We're probably going to be okay. But when you're putting a face mask on that has a mask or not, I mean, just take it off and clean it with something. The virus isn't that tough when you're, as far as killing with cleaning supplies. Have more than one thing to fit. Wipe the shoulder pads down. Have a couple that you can rotate through. But we're right. Some people just don't have the common sense to wear a mask, much less wipe something down before the next person uses it. Talked to Matt. He said that he felt the NCAA put out some guidelines. I never read them, but at our place and most places, it was a collaborative effort. We always had strength conditioning involved because we know he's most involved with the athletes, and then the head coach. We discuss this from late May on, probably once, twice a month, and more often later on, of how we could manage it. And we all try to put our common sense in, and then the head football coach gets involved. That's some common sense, and then some. The football coach comes in mind where he feels he's got to accomplish certain things, and there was some give and take on both parties to get through it. Most teams were able by July 23rd at least to start some 7-on-7 team drill, walk through more aggressive activities outside. He put that off until August 2nd because he wanted our guys to stay away from each other and be as safe as we could for as long as we could, which I thought was phenomenal and good on his part. As far as publishing anything, getting it out there, it's been word of mouth, and we're just now getting a little time where we can breathe and maybe write something down and share it. But I guess we're gonna have to see how it goes over the next 3-4 months, and if there's really value to it. I think there was. It was just frustrating that we couldn't, at least in our place, implement it. A buddy of mine is an ortho doc for the NHL Coyotes. He was in the bubble, and now he's out of the bubble. And between the Mayo Clinic where he works out of to see the guys, and between the team, each side, they probably hired more than 50 people to help manage just the COVID aspect of it. The testing, the monitoring, the cleaning, all the stuff need to be done between the Mayo Clinic and the actual team. Close to 50 extra hires just to manage it, and we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, I think I was talking to a friend who works in the NBA, and I said, "Well, how's it going?" And he said, "Well, it's been a month, and we could be here another 2 months." And I think losing in the playoffs may have a special sort of a happiness to it now, right? Like, I'm done, okay, right? It's just I don't know how he can do another 2 months away from his family. But Fred, I want you to jump in. Just based on what Eric's saying, it looks like strength and conditioning, are going to be the saviors here. What has been your experience in handling this?
It's been an adventure. Just sitting down, getting with our group, with our ADs, our athletic training staff, our strength staff, just kind of come up with plans of how it's going to work, where we're going to walk, where we're going to have our athletes come in at, enter at, go down to the field, because everything basically revolved around the stadium. Park there, come on down. Everybody walks in, they have to have a mask as usual. Before anybody was able to train, they had a test, quarantine, and then they'd be able to start. Obviously doing physicals and all that, and our athletic training staff has been doing a fantastic job of keeping everybody organized. What the huge logjam became was actually getting tests back reliably and in a timely manner, because what they were saying was, hey, we're going to do 15 minutes, ended up being 24 hours, if not more. That was the biggest logjam, I think, for us. Training, we trained outside. Again, weather was, I think we had a shift, maybe 2 workouts. This is with football. Shift 2 workouts to a different day, and just because of lightning. And, we ran out of time and had to, get the next group in. But for the most part, we had agreeable weather for the most part, except for the heat. You start a group at 7:00, we have a 2-hour window to run and lift. And as you progress through the day, that 11:00 group or that 1:00 group, they're feeling it. They're feeling the heat, and they're out there, they're running. That's one thing to be running in the heat. but they have to be out there for the entire 2-hour span, you know, it changes how those lifts go. Yeah. And then, you know, you start questioning, is this the most beneficial? Are we getting them to the best, you know, to the best of our abilities, them trained, ready to play the, you know, a sport like football or basketball or volleyball, whoever we had there at the time. But I think how we did it and separating people with 10 by 10 boxes, 10 feet away from the next box for the lifting, similar to what the Air Force guys are doing. We had guys on every 5-yard line in the end zone, spread out that way, 10 feet apart with a cone. They couldn't basically go anywhere unless we were, you know, instructing them where to go. But how we did, I think, went well. Eric is absolutely right. The masks are a headache. You know, just reminding guys of distance and keeping them up when they're down and how close they are. We did partner up. We ended up doing that. We started singles. We were able to do 30 guys in one group or 30 athletes in one group. And then we progressed to roommates. We knew who everybody's roommate was, because if they're able to, you know, eat, sleep, drink, shower, do whatever in their apartment, and they can't be with that person in a lifting group, we found that to be kind of odd. So we stuck with partnering up with roommates. Some guys have 3 in a room, some guys are just 2. So we progressed like that. So, but I think from here, you're totally right. We're going to become that a couple different things. Yes, physical preparation is going to be huge for all athletes, older to younger. But then I think also we're going to be that mental piece of it too, where, you know, an athlete had their fall season ripped away. So that kind of becomes a loss of identity for a little bit. So, you know, us keeping them mentally locked in is going to be a big point of this fall. There will be a little bit of football. I mean, the MAC, we were the first to shut down. We also have kind of heard first that we will be able to have some fall spring ball practice worked in. My question is just, you know, do we have to start all from square one again with our, you know, reacclimatization to being around people, even though in 2 weeks we're going to have all these students here for class in classrooms with no acclimatization. It goes from no in person to, you know, we've got, I think it's 25% of the classes are in person, actual physical in person, and then you have virtual and online and all that. So that's gonna be my biggest question is, my biggest concern is I don't want to be training the first week, really the first 2 weeks, all these students get back, because as we know, as we're all in college at some point, that first week in school was always interesting, just in a normal standpoint. Not to mention now if you have a virus running around campus. So we're definitely going to be getting with our AD and talking about how we're going to progress. You know, let's give it a week or two here to get our athletes, you know, make sure no one's got it, make sure it hasn't gotten passed to somebody, and then we bring them all in, whether we're training outside or inside. But let's be smart of how we progress our athletes back to training after school starts.
Yeah, because there's this line that's out there right now. You'll hear, like, whether it's Nick Saban or whoever, and they're like, hey, this is the safest place that the kid can be because, you know, we control this, we control that. But then when you get other students around, and I'll let Eric jump in later too, how do you control that? Like, if they're not in the bubble, if they're not in that bubble and they go to a party or they go, you know, have you guys discussed that a bit, Fred? Like you know, that would be the most confounding variable for me, is that yes, if we have them training and they're all in the same residence and they all eat in the same place, great, but that's not what happens.
Yeah, we haven't gotten into that yet. That's just stuff we've been raising concerns. Our athletic training staff, us, you know, we've been talking about that. We need to get with our ADs and let them know. Listen, telling our sport coach, because they're going to be gung ho, because to be able to do whatever they can the first few weeks, and we need to kind of pump the brakes because you just don't know how that first 2 weeks is going to go and how that's going to look and feel. Now, if your whole team's got online or virtual, we can roll. We're set, but that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah, Eric, you wanted to jump in about just, you know, keeping everything managed properly, and you know, and the other part of it too is if you say you provide the safe haven for the athletes, but then you have all the regular student population come back and then they get sick, and is there going to be a backlash against athletics because of that? Like you're giving them special treatment.
Yeah, I think Fred's exactly right. First few weeks of school and guys get back, and one, there's bigger population. This virus loves population, and that's where it just lives in. It loves it, multiplies, whatever. So the kids get back, and there's definitely going to be more positive tests. And then just from the party factor alone, they're young guys, and they can say they're not going to go out, and young athletes. I shouldn't say young guys, young athletes. They're going to want to go out. And they're going to have a party. And every time you've seen one of these big schools, they report tracing back to a house party. Rutgers had a huge one back to a house party. But there's so many more that aren't even being reported. It's the same story. A buddy of mine said he had 20 positives on the football team, and they traced most of them back to a house party the weekend before where a person knew she was positive and was making out, kissing with football players. And at the end of the night, she said, "Hey, I tested positive, but I feel good. You're okay." And that story, all these guys came back and said, and they contracted the virus from that. And it's that easy to spread. I mean, just being near somebody, but even closer, hand touching, hugging, kissing, is huge. So as a AT strength coaches, we have to fight against complacency. The kids are pretty good early, and we're all pretty good. And again, I'm patting Getty on the back because we both kind of see things. Being older guys have been around a much. The guys are going to start slacking in certain areas, and we kind of came same place and said our guys becoming complacent as they're walking out to our indoor. They're in gaggles of kids that are within 6 feet mask down. So it's good that we recognize that and know where our kids are going to fail and stay on top of it. I don't see how we can prevent it. People are going to want to party, go gather, be around each other in whatever manner, and it's going to be really hard to maintain unless you're in a real bubble. If you're in the real bubble and we're keeping people out, and you see the NBA now trying to let a few people in. Now we're getting a little dicey of who can come in, who can't come in. What are they doing before that? Who knows? And I asked Derek also about the testing part of it. When we looked into it, it was going to be about $360,000 for the football season just to test the football season weekly during the competition season. I don't think many people can afford that. I think the bigger schools can, but the Power 5 teams, if you read their return to sport protocols, they're testing weekly out of the competition season, and they want to test 2 and prefer a third time during the competition season. Most places, if I talk to my counterpart at Navy, they're not able to turn the test around in time. If they want a test 72 hours before competition, they're not able to do it. Nobody's able to do that right now. And you're looking at a shop in Salt Lake City that can do all of our testing for the Mountain West Conference, but can they turn it around in 72 hours? It doesn't seem possible right now. We had our Boise State football team, everybody's pretty well known. They came back and Idaho had a big rush of positive tests. Their hospital there in Boise got overwhelmed. The hospital said, "We can't test you guys anymore." So that was one of the reasons. One, they had some positives on campus, but also the hospital couldn't test anymore because they were testing real sick people, not preventative sick people like we want to do in athletes, because we feel like we're pretty special and we should do all this testing, and we are. But I can't imagine, the pro teams that with the amount of money they have that they can test every single day, that's super. I don't know that a once a week test is really that helpful, because it may get the asymptomatic kids. The symptomatic kids in our place have shown up, said, "Hey, I don't feel good, I need help." But the asymptomatic kids, it only proves that you're negative for that one day when they put the cotton swab in your nose. You could come up be positive the next day. So that's why I think it's unmanageable. One, kids are going to go out and party. They're going to have fun. If you really can't test for it every day and get a fast turnaround time on the test, we don't feel like we can manage it.
As far as the testing goes, Eric, and maybe you can shine some light on it, what is the actual procedure? So you can walk us through it. I have no idea, and I don't know if it varies by location or university, but get a nasal swab, goes into some sort of protective thing, gets sent out to somewhere. And can you kind of go through that as far as what you know?
I'll do my best. Yeah. So I think the main test is a PRC test or PCR. I get it confused. That's the best test they want you to do. At the Air Force Academy, we're doing surveillance testing. So the FDA just approved batch testing. So it's good for a population that is overall healthy. So you test a few people. You can put the individual's vial into, and I don't know if it's 4 per vial. So 4 people go into 1 vial, and they test it, and everyone's negative. If someone comes up positive, they know those 4 people need to be tested again, more specific. So that's more surveillance. That doesn't count towards what the leagues are asking, but it gives you a good idea of who in your population may have this. So at the Air Force Academy, we're testing 700 of the population. So 4,100 cadets plus some faculty folks are involved in it. And it's going through the math, and one of the science biology department are doing the test and calculating it for just surveillance stuff. From there, I guess we would have to, they would go to the cadet clinic and test. And as right now, if we had a season starting today, we don't have the means to test appropriately for our football team or any athletic team on base. For reading protocols, Big Ten wants for their more contact collision sports 3-time testing a week. Cross country, I think they would go with in season only 1 time a week. And their deal with the running sports, they could start with their mask up at the start, run when they feel free, drop the mask and continue the race is what they've talked about. I know that some other schools have tried 2 different hospitals to get the testing done on time, and they're still not able to get it done within the 72-hour window. That's kind of my knowledge on the testing.
Anybody else have any information? John Hughes, you said there was a saliva test that you guys are looking at?
It was just approved by the FDA, I guess, within the last day or so. I think it was funded mostly by the NBA. With the saliva test, I think the University of Illinois might have been using a saliva test as well. And I think they're saying it's not quite as accurate, but if you test with it twice, that within a 2 or 3 day period, do 2 tests with it, it essentially covers like your 99% accuracy rate or whatever. And I guess it looks like it's fairly cheap. They're saying the supplies to do it are like $4. They just have to have labs get online to be able to start doing it. So that might make a huge difference with, like Eric, you were saying it was going to cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to test over the course of a season. If colleges can get their hands on this, not only does it help with the cost issue, but as well with that kind of turnaround time of trying to do the test within so many hours before a competition. So we'll see if that could possibly be a big breakthrough. We'll see how it plays out though.
And all that runs through you, Eric? Like that's your responsibility, the testing management in terms of?
No, I mean, I'll track with the team, but it's through our team docs up on the hill.
Okay.
So anything like that. Now, if we're to get in the season, I don't know. I know many schools, the ATs are doing the testing and setting them up. And a couple of my colleagues, they've actually bought 2 or 3 of the testing units to expedite the testing there in their own labs. That's not something that we've done, but like I said, I just, it's relaxing now to have a weekend off and still a little stressful thinking about where we are and what we're going. And the public sees one side of it, and basically they see the guys playing on a Saturday. All of us know what these athletes go through year round to prepare for that Saturday. Saturday is the easy day mostly. I mean, it's the fun day. We hadn't even got into talk about travel. Football teams are probably safest if they're chartering a plane, but other sports have to go through an airport, travel with other people. What happens if somebody becomes symptomatic on the road? Many states say you can't bring them back. They're gonna have to quarantine for 14 days out there. There's so much unknown and so many things that we haven't even got to because we're just trying to get us to practice that we're working on. And travel's one. And again, we said it earlier, I don't disagree with the coaches that say the football players or the athletes are probably safest in our athletic area. but they're leaving that area is the reality of it. And not only are they leaving the area, most of us are leaving the area and coming back into the area. You know, I've done my best to come and go, getting groceries delivered, food delivered, probably like a lot of people. But socially, it's been zero for me. You know, I just don't want to be the guy to get one. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get my team sick. I don't want to get my coworkers sick. But the kids are going to leave. And, you know, if it's faculty or if it's a GA coach, they're going to leave, do their thing, and become in contact with somebody. And it's going to spread, spread rather quickly.
Well, I guess that's why the masks are important. And you talked about the running sports. I'll get Carmen and Ryan to jump in about running, track, cross country. How's that going to work? Like I'm on YouTube and you can see like track meets in Europe being done, and it's a little bizarre, and there won't be anybody with a mask or anything like that. So obviously people are trying to do it. I don't know how successful it is, but you know, if they say they have a cross country season, Ryan, well, how do you do that? How do you have time trials? Do they run as a group? Do they have a little, you know, pack of people?
So I've actually spent a lot of time on this in the state of Missouri with some of the meet directors, if you will, the people that actually put the timing systems on and dealing with the county. I don't deal directly with the county medical executives, but trying to convince them that cross country is not a high contact sport or a dangerous sport as football and soccer is. And the reality is that, you know, depending on the size of the field, since we've got, you know, fully automatic timing that's widespread and has been used for the last 10 years, the meets in cross country have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, where they rival the battle scenes from Braveheart, you know, where you have these thousands of people clashing and elbows and sharp objects, blood and everything else. And so what we've discussed is, first of all, you know, limiting the number of teams that are in the meet. We have to limit the number of competitors because you have to put these kids on buses. So if you have to social distance on a bus, that means every other seat. Well, that's about 14 kids, you know, to put them on a bus. You know, now cross country is one of those sports where you have a lot of parents who hang around and come to the meets. Are you going to have thousands of parents bringing their dogs and their cats and their pandolins to the meet and have them running around on a leash or whatever? You know, that's an issue. Probably going to have to limit the number of people who come and cheer on their kid. We're probably going to social distance the starting boxes so that you have 2 to 3 starting boxes in between each team. The kids will probably warm up with their masks on. And then the real concern from the county, and again, I wasn't in the meetings. I'm getting this second or third hand from my friends who have basically been charged with putting this as a proposal in front of everybody. The big issue is the finish line, because everybody's collapsing and falling all over the place and looking like the dawn of the dead. And you have to get medical officials to grab those sweaty, heavy breathing kids and move them through the line. Well, that's usually not a problem with small meets. But again, if you have 700 runners in a meet, you're going to have some kids who basically are doing the baton death march in the last 100 or 200 meters to the finish line, and it's going to be a struggle. So they're talking about everybody who manages the finish line has to be in full PPE. So they have to look like they're in a hazmat suit. You know, Dr. Fauci's telling us we got to wear goggles and a face shield and a mask and all that kind of stuff. So we don't know what full PPE would look like in a sporting venue on a finish line. That's one of the concerns. The other suggestion that we made, and I actually like this idea, is that you have a timing trigger like 100 yards, 200 yards down the field. And what you do is you send people in intervals. So basically my number one versus your number one, kind of like a wrestling match where you have your weight divisions, right? And then you send your number 2 a minute later, your number 3, your number 4, your number 5, your number 6, your number 7. And then they all race against each other, and the computer can put all the times together and you get a score. Now that may not be ideal, but for crying out loud, at least the kids get a chance to race and run and all that kind of stuff. And that naturally would separate the athletes where they wouldn't be in so much of a peloton on a cross country course. So those are things that we thought about for cross country. Track and field, That's easy. The only worry there is you got a couple kids in the 800 or a mile or a 1500 or a 32 or a 3K. Like, that's not a big deal. But those are only small groups. You can separate those out a lot easier. And then in the sprints, you have every other lane, or in the hurdles, every other lane. Field events, not a problem to stay 6 feet distance. I watched the entire Monaco Diamond League event, and I have to say I had a tear in my eye. It's like the first time I've gotten to watch a real competitive track meet in well over a year. It can be done, but those people to compete in Monaco, the Americans, they had to quarantine for like 2 weeks before they were even allowed to move around in Europe. Now that they're in Europe, those athletes will be allowed to go to other European track meets. But I could imagine there's going to be some issues when they're trying to get through the different, borders and things like that, even within the European Union, and it being free flowing. Those countries have shut that down. So those are things that can be done. But track and field, I have high confidence that track and field can be done without a lot of modification. Cross country takes some creativity to fit the sport within everybody's anxiety and hysteria. Some of it real, especially at the end and especially at the beginning. But we're hoping that some point in late October, we're actually going to be able to race, even though we're going to have to give up the essence of the sport and be creative in how to do it. And once it's set up, it's no big deal. It's just the setup, the creation, the build to it is always the issue. And then people who are critics, you got to work past them and then do the competition and then see that nobody gets sick. That's the issue, right? And that's the issue we all face with all the different sports. Football is very difficult because of just the numbers they were talking about. $330,000 to test, that's tough. That's expensive. So anyway.
That's crazy. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, and I'm like Eric, like I'm going to dislocate my shoulders every time, but like Carmen, what about the high jump? Are they just going to have that, like in the doctor's office butcher paper where you just like tear a sheet off after every jump? Take it with you. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of work, Ryan. Pole vault and high jump seem like the most difficult ones.
Yeah, like how are they going to clean the mat afterwards after each person jumps? I mean, are they going to spray it with something? I don't know. I don't. I like what Ryan said though, in terms of that great idea for cross country. That's excellent. And for outdoor track, I think for the most part that will work, but not so much for indoor track because of course everyone's enclosed. But I see outdoor track and cross country, the new format, working. But my big concern is, I mean, it's one thing, I had no idea that the cost of testing was going to be $360,000, but also what happens when players do start to get sick? Who's going to pay for those medical costs? Because I've heard those are pretty expensive price tags too. When someone does get sick and they have to go to the hospital and all that, being in intensive care and stuff. But are the athletic departments prepared to pick up those costs, or is it up to each player to have their own personal insurance and it's coming from their family as opposed to the school picking up the cost? It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, Rob, there was, before I asked Rob, but I was thinking of those, those gerbil hamster bubble things that they run around in. You just put every athlete in one of those and they can bounce against each other. Anyways, Rob, there was somebody in New York City, I think they got a bill for $1.9 million after spending 50 days. Like, what about that?
I don't know. I got a couple of questions, and I apologize. I jumped on late. I was stuck in traffic, but I didn't get on until about half hour in. Listen, the athletes are supposed to be covered by medical insurance by the university. So that's, I assume, what they say about assume, I think that's part of the payment, right? I mean, they get hurt. Same thing, they dislocate their shoulder, they get shoulder surgery. They don't pay that out of pocket, right? I'm assuming. Eric can verify that or not. The school pays for that surgery, and then they rehab with the trainers or the physical therapy of the university or whatever it may be. So I think that the school would be liable to cover those costs. My question is, stepping back, and has anybody heard anything about this? Stepping back, you have presidents of the university, and don't think there aren't lawyers and compliance and all that other stuff in here. What happens if somebody dies? what is that? What are the legal ramifications with conferences ending their season because of risk of this disease, and the conferences that move forward and play and someone dies? The legality, the lawyers are going to go up and say, these conferences knew better. They stopped their season. You didn't. You're liable. Or the athletes that presently have myocarditis and, God forbid, die 5 years from now, or are physically disabled so that they can't work. Just like you hear about lawsuits, whether it's the women with sexual harassment suing years later. What happened at Penn State happened years later. So the presidents and the university has to weigh their favoritism and their affinity for athletics, the Power 5 conferences, the money revenue we're going to gain by playing. They have to weigh that against the possible legal lawsuits that could occur going forward. So I don't know, if anybody has spoken about that. I don't know if anybody's heard about, if universities are talking about that. Then the other thing that comes to mind, and this may say this a little far-fetched, but you all know what happened in the Pac-12 with players making demands. As you go through this process, and players, and they should know that they're safe, and you're negotiating, so to speak, with the players in regards to, yes, we're going to do this testing, and the players say, no, that's not good enough, whatever. Are you opening up the door through this pandemic so that moving forward, when this is over, you've established a platform for the players to make the same demands that went on in the Pac-12? Are you empowering players with a voice and a platform for a voice going through this? And thus, are college programs going to say, we don't want to wind up paying the players, we don't want to wind up paying health benefits 10 years down the road, all the demands made by the Pac-12 players, so it's not worth having a season. That, compounded by if somebody dies, compounded by if someone gets myocarditis and it's limited their ability to work, and so we're going to have disability lawsuits, all that stuff. I have not heard anything, but those are definitive possibilities. Those conversations are going on, which has something to do with athletics, but has something to do with the survival of the university. Presidents and their legal counsel would not surprise me if they're having those conversations. And I throw that out there. Has anybody heard anything like this?
Well, even for the school districts, like you could extrapolate that to Ryan's situation in high school and like, hey, we're going to have a cross country meet. 5 kids get lung damage. Like who pays for that? Who's liable for that, Ryan?
Well, that's a great question. I think that no one wants to be the first and no one wants to be the one, because the hyper awareness of anything that goes outside of what the research is telling us that would shed a positive light or an improvement on our situation. So I don't know if I posted it on here in the comments or not, but there's a New York Times article that referenced South Korea and schools talking about the spread of the virus and how kids are spreading the virus more than they originally thought. It turns out they're spreading the virus just as much as the adults. So even though the virus is spreading and that's not good, it's inaccurate in how much more the kids are spreading the virus, right, and going to school. And like Rob said, I think the most important part of this is we're weighing the cost benefit of all of this, the cost benefit of the mental health, the cost benefit of the kids essentially losing a year and a half of in-person education, which I can tell you as an educator, virtual does not match being in the room, just like stand-up comedy does not match being in the room. And so it's like, yes, we know, I think everybody knows that, but no one wants to be the person, the principal, the administrator that directly or indirectly was responsible for this kid dying because they were one of the very, very few kids that got sick and died. Then you take into account that this virus, the insidious nature of it, and then the potential long-term effects of it are the scariest thing, like lung damage, cardiac issues, things like that. And then that brings into question, well, what about sports like soccer and football that already have issues with long-term physical trauma that is a nature of the sport. You know, we've seen this with CTE and, you know, major breaks in terms of, you know, knee damage, shoulder damage, mental health, abusive PEDs, whatever it may be, offensive linemen dying, you know, like their life expectancy is 20 years less or something. And again, I'm throwing out numbers, but, you know, these are things that, and I don't have the answers to that, but what I would assume to answer Rob's question is, how have those things been handled? And then I would say the legal history and the precedent would probably fall along a similar line, you know? And that's the scary thing. And when these athletes do start making demands, and the NCAA has been more open to listening to those demands, allowing athletes to make money off of their likeness or whatever, you get into some power struggles that are unique that we haven't come across before. And in a high school setting, I don't know. You know, I know I'm covered by insurance. I know that I'm going to do exactly everything that the county and the city expects me to do in the guidelines. And just like Fred and a number of other, and Eric, we're talking about the masks up, masks down. My assistant coach, man, she is very much on it, to the point where it's like the kid's like, gosh, can't I just get a drink of water and be within 3 feet? No, sorry, that's not going to happen, because we're not going to be the school district or the coach that's on the Channel 5 news. We even though we were well intended in our message and our means and our methods, be the one that has somebody get sick, because everybody's looking for that, because everybody wants that to be the story, and it's going to likely be the story as we come out of our bubbles, as we interact, as we go back to school. People are going to get sick. Now, that situation that happened in Georgia, where no one's wearing a mask, there's no social distancing, you have 1,000 kids in the hallway, that's just galactically stupid. And they should know that that's gonna be a problem. It's gonna be a problem. New York City had an issue, not because there's anything about the Italians, my people in New York City, eating too much pizza and pasta, you know, okay? I'm a guinea, I can say it, okay? But it's because it's people living on top of people and reliant on public transportation. Schools are the only time where you have thousands of kids interacting like that on a daily basis. And so, like, if we're not galactically stupid, we probably will avoid things. But at the same time, there are people out there that are looking for that, because that's the story, because there's no other story being told right now.
See, my concern is there's gonna be, I hate to say it like this, I don't know how else to put it. There's gonna be a standard of risks, right? Like, everybody goes to a party, people get sick, someone dies. I don't know if anybody gets sued by going to the party. What I'm saying is, so let's take strength and conditioning. Somebody's working out, they bench press and they tear their pec. I don't think the school gets sued, right? They get their surgery, everything else. Somebody gets rhabdo working out, which is very rare. You hear about it, right? They want the coaches fired. Maybe there's a lawsuit. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, there are some conferences that have canceled, right? And now other conferences play. And if the conferences that play, someone gets really sick, or God forbid someone passes away, a precedent has been set. No, you shouldn't play, by the conferences who cancel. And so, you know, what's going to happen if, God forbid, something like that happens in the conferences that play, regardless of the sport? So, you know, that's what I'm saying. Not that the general public, someone's going to die, or because we've had 150,000 deaths, and I'm not aware of any lawsuits. Not that they're not there, but
will it make a difference with these lawsuits of saying, well, this conference canceled, didn't have competitions, but if a conference goes ahead and plays, and they say we have these stringent protocols that we're testing, and we know that we're not putting anybody on the field that has it with some reasonable assurity, does it make a difference if somebody in that conference passes away versus the other conference that maybe they're not having a competition, but they're still practicing on campus for the entire fall?
I have no idea.
Is there a bigger risk of the competition than just staying on campus and practicing? And then
what I'm saying is, if I go to a New Year's Eve party socially, or I go to a party on campus, you know, someone gets sick and something bad happens, I don't know if there's going to be litigation. It's just the general public, the general population. When you have a precedent set that conferences have canceled sports seasons because there's too dangerous to participate in athletics and other conferences don't, well, lawyers are going to say, you know, you're negligent. See, don't forget, it's not about, I hate saying this too, sometimes it's not about being, I didn't want to say it yet, but they're going to say, how come you played? These conferences didn't play because of this danger. You took the risk and now someone died. You're responsible. You should have been responsible like the rest of the conferences that canceled the season. And because you didn't, this person died and you're liable for that. How do you handle that? Maybe the lawyers are right, maybe they're wrong. And sometimes it's not about being right and wrong. It's about, you know, settling. And I hate to say it like that, but, you know, it's just, I don't know.
Right.
But don't think that schools aren't having those conversations about if something bad happens, what's the financial consequences of this?
Is that happening at the high school level, Ryan? Are people having those conversations from a financial liability point of view, or is it just health and safety?
I mean, 100%. I think that there's issues. I think one of the things that everybody forgets is that the most dangerous sport from a logical, reasonable perspective of transmission is going to be full contact sports, and especially combat sports. And football, American football, is very much a combat sport, right? You know, people are breathing heavy, they're spitting, you know, there's blood, there's all these types of things. And football and basketball in the NCAA, for most schools, bring in the most money. So it's an all or nothing situation where we can't be more nuanced or surgical, because no offense, I love the sports I coach, but I know that they don't make a lot of money, and I think they could. That's a whole nother conversation that we could talk about how they could make money, but they don't in our current structure. So the most dangerous sport, the one that probably cannot happen without the conversation that Rob's talking about, the risk, right, is the one that makes the most money. So up front, that's an issue. I know that our school district and the other school districts in the St. Louis area, they were making decisions about whether or not to play sports, not just to mitigate risk, but to mitigate costs that then they could mobilize to move into other things to try to make virtual learning a better situation. For example, having Wi-Fi hotspots in the homes of a lot of these kids that live in underprivileged situations. The transportation of meals to these families, because in a lot of schools, which we didn't really know in America, you know, which I did, but like regular old Americans that aren't part of the school system don't realize that the public schools pretty much take care of 2 meals a day for those kids, breakfast and lunch. And those aren't always the best meals at those schools, but it is what it is. And so that money, they were thinking, hey, there's no way we're coming back. There's no way we're going to be able to play sports. So, and again, I can't say this for sure, but this is my assumption, and from things I've been told second or third hand, that put them in a difficult spot to say we can't have sports and then try to pay for things and then balance our budget. And on top of that, our state governor, in his infinite wisdom, decided to cut $180 to $200 million out of our public education budget for this year. Not a good choice, you know, because that money, that $200 million or dollars or so, could have really helped us out. I know that I ran into a situation in 2019 where a kid pulled her muscle, a pretty common thing in sports and especially in track and field. Not for me, knock on wood, because I've only had 3 in 10 years, and we've been pretty damn fast, which I'm pretty proud of. But this parent was ready to kill me. I mean, MFing me, calling the principal, you know, all this kind of stuff. So that just for a pulled muscle, for a kid who's out of shape, who was twerking on the ground the day before during picture day, which is the worst day of practice, is picture day, because kids are always screwing around and making mistakes. Okay, not the fact that she came in out of shape, she didn't work out in the summer, she didn't work out in the winter. You know, it's me injuring the kid when she ran in a time trial, you know, and she wanted my job, you know, and I've proven over almost 2 decades that I'm a reasonable guy when it comes to what I do in my training and warm-ups and all this kind of stuff. So now you put the pandemic on the table and someone dies, some kid passes, you know, that's going to be newsworthy. And just like Rob said, it's like, who's going to be liable? Somebody's going to get sued. And even the reverse is true. Like Liberty University sued the New York Times for the story about how they had all these cases and all this kind of stuff went down. And they're like, that isn't what happened, you know? And they went and tried to sue the New York Times over that. So yeah, there's going to be lawsuits all over the place. And at the local level, there's going to be stuff in school districts. Our school district, the one I go to, has the most lawsuits levied against it because we live in an area where all the lawyers and doctors live. That's who goes to my school, you know? That's who's there. That we have the most diverse school and the most educated populace probably in the St. Louis area. And they know the law and they know medicine. And so if something goes down with their baby in a really bad way, they're going to make problems.
What I love about Ryan is you can rearrange a few letters in his name and you can get rant. Anyways, Omar, I just finished watching Last Chance U, which was based out of Oakland, and I thank God that was on. I got to watch some sports and see something new. So, but there's inherently some risk and reward in every aspect of sports. Now you have the quarterback from Clemson who's coming up in his senior year, and he's worried that he's not going to be able to play. And so you have these, even the kids in the Last Chance U are like, oh, sports are my way out. Are some people thinking that there's a lot of pressure right now that they got to play because they got to make the NBA or make the NFL draft, or, and how do you balance that off? Because would they rather get COVID, or would they rather just miss their chance of buying a house for their mom?
Well, I think a couple things. One, I wanted to, before I forget, I think it was Rob who mentioned about the insurance coverage, and that if a kid gets hurt, that the university usually covers. In California, the kids insurance covers it, and whatever the insurance, the kids insurance doesn't cover, the university will then cover the rest. And then it becomes this huge loophole to take. My point guard had his ankle injured last year, and it took 8 months to get $135 paid. It was ridiculous. So I would say that. And secondly, there's some other stuff that is happening here in California. I know our state school system, 4 schools have fired all the assistant coaches on staff, all of them gone, because they have to make budget cuts. On the private sector, there's some schools that have made their coaches 11 months and did a budget cut there. On top of that, some of the smaller schools that are not necessarily well funded, like the previous institution I worked at, they're cutting their actual budget, so the kids don't get gear this year because they have to use that money for testing, which again creates a different dynamic and a different student athlete experience for those kids. Now, to answer your question, Derek, I think there's a few. I think there's been a trickle down. Because our leadership is so, faulty, from the top down, and there hasn't been one message with all this stuff. Everyone's doing kind of what they wish and what they want to do, and some want to believe it, some others don't. I know there's some guys that are training guys out on the park and doing stuff like that because they want to buy their mom their home and do all that, and they feel like this is an opportunity to train while others are not, and get that edge. But I just think it's a little bit. I think I heard Stan Johnson, who's the coach over at LMU now, is like trying to beat COVID, like try to win COVID as much as possible. But how you do that, it's going to be so different in different pockets. We have different pockets here in the Bay Area that require a mask. There's other places that don't. There's places that it's just so mixed up that is crazy. My kids started school this week online. There are schools in Sacramento that are having their kids attend school. It's just such a mix of things all around, man. So, but people are taking a chance, and I guess that's okay. I mean, it's part of who we are. It's what you want to do, but I just think the leadership has been so faulty that there hasn't been an exact message. And I think it was Rob who mentioned this, but also no one's taking the NCAA or the like different conferences are doing different things, and that's not good either. You know, I think there has to be a universal message so everyone's on the same page. Urban Meyer, I think, was the one that came out and said you can't move football season. You can't expect kids to play one full year of football because that's gonna ruin someone's body. I think he said something like 4,000 repetitions are gonna be thrown on that kid's body. You can't expect football to survive that. And so there's just so many intangible factors there, man. I know I'm ranting all over the place, maybe because I went after Ryan, but but yeah, man, there's just a lot, man. There's just so much to this. It's not just it's not cookie cutter, unfortunately. So, you know.
Hey, can I ask, even if they play this season, does everyone think the injury rate will be up due to the pandemic's limitations on training or virtual training,
Absolutely.
anything else, like the NFL, no preseason games, etc.? Does anybody think injury rates will go up this year, which has a correlation to the insurance question?
Playing in the fall, yes. I think playing in the spring season, I think, I mean, this is the most amount of time we're going to have to train athletes get ready.
That's a good point. That's a good experiment, Fred. If we have a group that starts in September, plays, and then you have a group that starts in whatever. I don't think they should start in January. I think they should push it a little bit later. But yeah, in the spring, you have the prep group, the non-prep group. Great experiment.
But I also think that creates again, this thing isn't happening. It's happening in different pockets, right? So like, say there's a protocol that 50 kids on a football team at Air Force get COVID, and all of a sudden they have to take a step back. Well, there's other teams that are training and then getting ready for their season. So now their training gets set back. And so it's just, I don't know. It's tough to really think about in the sense of like what makes it an equal or even playing field for everybody to do this when this COVID thing has been all over the place in different pockets at different times.
Yeah, I still think the insurance thing is very interesting. All the stuff that you guys noted in the chat there. Being Canadian, it's not really a consideration, fortunately. But yeah, like if Eric, in your case, if somebody gets gravely ill, who covers it? Or I mean, I don't know if your situation is different than a regular university.
So it's different, but where it benefits them is they will have the medical care for as long as they need it. So the TRICARE system will take care of them if they had an injury, and even if they left the academy until it's resolved. So I think we're better than that than a lot of other schools where there is problems with insurance coverage, and that's a big deal with all those Pac-12 athletes bringing it up that we need to have coverage for 5 more years after we get done playing football for anything that might linger from COVID or I think even any other injuries, because once they cut them loose, I think at other schools there's not much care they can get. And talking about that too, is that we also think if these schools that are playing football now, something happens to one of them, I think the legal feedback is, what was the standard of care? Are they going to look and say, well, shoot, all these conferences except for 3 canceled, you probably didn't provide the standard of care for what was to prevent the injury. I mean, the legal folks could figure that out. I don't understand, but I think that's what it always comes back to is, did you provide a standard of care, what everybody at your level of experience, knowledge for your athletes? And that's what's going to get somebody in trouble if they don't provide that standard. At our place, we asked, what's the threshold of shutting a team down? And I was kind of typing it here, is if 10% of a team tests positive, they will shut that team down. Now, whatever that means, is it a 14-day isolation or what? But they would definitely say middle of season, 10%, you're done. If there's one positive transfer from athlete to athlete or staff to athlete, they're going to shut it down. That means it's within that family or group of people, and that becomes a big concern. Now that comes from our team docs, but also the guide in all this is public health. And with this pandemic, that's who's going to make all these decisions of social distancing, who gets held out, contact tracing. It's all through the public health. The the athletic trainer or the team docs don't have much to do with it once they put the protocol in place.
Well, like any compliance issue in the NCAA, are there going to be teams that overlook positives, or because I even heard in Florida there was players going, hey, wait, they didn't say that I was positive? Or do you think that's going to happen? Is that going to be a problem where people just overlook the test results, say whatever, this, we don't want this to stop our season, so let's cover it up?
I think it is a problem, and I think there's schools that don't. We talk about doing everything consistently. There are schools that weren't doing it right. We've seen their protocols. We don't feel like they were up to snuff, and the ones we've seen have had big trouble. And one's in our league, one's just right up I-25 here, and they had a bunch of kids test positive, and they're going through some other evaluations, investigations on their campus. But looking at their protocol, it was nowhere near what our protocol or return to sport plan was, and it was scary looking at it. And it wasn't long after that they had to close their football practice. And it's scary when you see that. You don't want to be right, but you got to be right. You got to do everything absolutely correct and not become complacent, or else these kids are going to get sick. And we talked about it. I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks ago. It feels like 2 years ago. We decided that one day that the reason teams are going to play is economic base. There's no other reason. If it was for the safety and welfare of the kids, there's no doubt everybody would shut down.
Yeah.
But it's economically driven, from the president on down to the athletic department and the league, and that's what's driving it. And these guys can lose a lot of money, and I don't think it's right. I mean, I think we should shut it down until we get it right. But I also know the reality of it, and I think Fred said it also. We're the mental psyche of these athletes that are losing their sport is a big deal, and I think I saw it in our guys. There were guys they were back a notch. They weren't as intense as they were last year. They knew it was on the horizon. They're smart kids. Our guys are lucky. If they get out here in 4 years, they've got a job that's going to pay them $55,000 or so out the door the day after they graduate. They're going to go fly jets. They've got a career. This year's team, maybe we had a couple more guys that had a chance to go to the NFL, and they're concerned what they're going to do in the spring. Are they going to forego a spring semester because they don't want to become injured? They want to have a chance to play for an NFL team. Other guys maybe think they're on the bubble, that they need some more film. So they really push them to play in the spring before they graduate, or maybe getting a turn back where they come back for one more year. But our guys are lucky insurance-wise. They're covered. I don't think other schools are that lucky. I've got colleagues that when a kid gets injured and they require surgery, especially I think Kaiser's the big one out of California that comes up, that the kids at certain schools, if they're in Texas, they're going to have to go back to California to get their surgery. The school can't pick up the backside of it, or the beyond whatever their insurance covers, so they've got to go home and get their surgery.
I think our news came out of canceling it was a week ago, and I couldn't tell you how many, on Monday we had guys that were, fighting bacteria. We were running, we were doing conditioning. We had a group of guys that were coming in and working, and like in the middle, it just realized it hit them. It's like, we should be practicing. We should be preparing for a season. We should be having, be in the middle of camp and being sore and tired of that, rather than, doing running. And there's countless guys that were just, it hit them and it really stung. And, the other sports, I don't think it hit them as much. I don't think because they're able to shift to the spring. I mean, volleyball, it's proven you can go right along with the men's schedule. Soccer, they have spring matches. It can happen. Football is one of those ones where it's, you train so much for those, in our league, 12 opportunities. If you're lucky, you get a 13th or a 14th. But, that's one of those ones, like, Eric's exactly right. Like, do I go for it? Do I not go for it? For the MAC level, it's it's imperative you have that breakout year, that last year, to get that tape, to have the opportunity to even go to the next level, to get out, so to speak, and provide for people. But like it leaves such a huge question mark for so many people, and there's no college football, college, commissioner saying, everyone's shutting down. We're doing this right. We're going to make sure that we can have the best season possible for all of these athletes, because it's not about the money. It's about them, having the opportunity like all of us did.
So let me ask this. Let's say we have a vaccine and it works 100%, and this thing is over in January or February, right? Let's go pie in the sky. Are we in the same situation in the spring? If we move all fall sports to the spring, are there enough, for lack of a better term, are there enough playing surfaces for everybody to play? Or who in the spring are you going to decide is not playing like we have to decide in the fall? Because the snowball's going downhill, right? If we move basketball and football because they're revenue generators to the spring, what sports aren't going to play? Because can volleyball play? Because basketball needs the basketball courts. So what's even if everything's resolved, which I doubt it will be, let's say it is, what sports are you going to pick in the spring that can't play? You just don't have enough surfaces, right?
Well, there's also the workload that you're providing for the administration. Some schools probably can't even handle the workload of, I know at a previous institution I was at too, that it was tough in the transition when fall was finishing, heading into winter, and then also when winter, we were middle of our basketball season, and then all of a sudden we had to throw in baseball, softball, golf, and all those other teams and stuff, and they were barely managing that. And I can't imagine having one group, all these sports going on at once, and somehow thinking that the stats are, we had one sports information director. How the heck is this person going to be at multiple places? We had one strength coach, and how with three others, or one assistant AD of facilities, where it worked out well the way we had it now, because if baseball was away, then they can do that. But that's the other part too.
Yeah. So this problem's not going away, even if certain things are resolved.
Well, and then if you take it a trickle down, how do the high school kids get film to get recruited by college coaches? How do you know who's really good, who's not? When you're talking about young men, we know that young men continue to physically improve leaps and bounds throughout high school. So the guy as a sophomore may not even make the team, and then makes this huge leap junior, senior year. You don't have film. The other thing I find really interesting, and I find it funny, but not in a ha-ha way, is like if you move all these seasons back, a lot of those now this isn't a problem for college, but we already talked about a couple staff people, it is a problem. But for high school, the football coach might coach basketball, might coach track and field, might coach baseball. Now all these seasons are smashed together. The athletes are going to have to choose. The coaches are going to have to choose. You're not maybe going to be getting paid. So then you have to choose, I'm going to coach this sport or this sport. We already saw, like I told you, that they're trying to reduce our salaries for coaches. Well, that means now you're taking a pay cut, which could be significant money for a high school coach, right, to take away his extracurricular, extra duty. You've got coaches competing for the first time ever for the same athletes in the building that they've never experienced that before, because those sports are usually spread out where you have the crossover and the issues. It's more on the margins. Now that recruiting of the kids within your building is going to be front and center. The kid has to figure out what sport they're going to play to decide where they're going to go to college, right? So all of these things, and we mentioned facilities. I mean, I coach track and field. I've got somebody on my infield, during track season almost every day. I can't imagine what that looks like. Then the other thing is, for a high school athlete, if they end up navigating all those seasons, you could have a high school athlete being in a competitive season for 7 straight months, which I know we have 3 sport athletes back in the old days. We don't have that as much. Kids aren't as prepared, not just because the coaches or anything. It's about they're just not prepared because they don't have the life experience when they come to you. So those are interesting things that when we look at California and Illinois, who have decided to shift, and we talked about weather, like you're in northern Chicago playing football in February. Woo, that's going to be an interesting experience, And so whatever our solutions are, they're going to be difficult, and there's going to be some growing pains to those solutions, or not even solutions, but workarounds.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing. I don't know what to say, man. Dang, can we play? Do I have a court? Can I get my ankle tape? Am I going to get sued? Does my insurance cover me? Oh, geez. Well,
Well, I think if people get sick and, not that I take that lightly, but you'll go through things that I think there won't be legal issue. I'm talking about the extremes, and you have so many participants that, it just takes one, right? You have hundreds, maybe thousands of, of football players at a Division I level. I don't know what the numbers are, but, I'm not trying to be the Grim Reaper. I'm trying to be a little bit a realist. And if costs have to be, as Eric said before, the Navy takes care of their athletes till it's resolved. All right, well, if costs are assumed 5 years post-graduation, or things occur that in this legal battle, long-term care is part of the settlement. That's money that keeps going on and on and on. And all I'm saying is these are possibilities that are reality. And it's more than just the football coaches, the trainers, the strength and conditioning coach. You have the university president being advised by legal advisors saying, this is the benefit of these TV contracts. This is the benefit if you have sales of 25% of your stadium ticket sales, et cetera. And here's the possibility of the accountability and the cost of that accountability if things go wrong. Now, what do you want to do? Those conversations are going on. It's not just about the protocol and the cost of testing and everything else. Those conversations are happening. They have
Eric?
to.
Yeah. Eric, you get last word.
So I read a quote yesterday, and I don't know who it was. It's probably a media person asked the Oregon State athletic director, what is the Pac-12 seeing that the SEC is not seeing? And the response was probably reality. And I thought that was great. And apparently I think this Oregon State AD was at LSU last year.
Wow.
But I think we just have to do our best. I don't know if they're going to get through the season. I don't think we should play a spring season, at least for football, for many reasons. One, I don't believe that we're going to be out of COVID yet. I think playing 3 seasons, even if it's a small season in 18 months, is going to be pretty hard on the football players' bodies or whatever athletes are doing it. And absolutely, my heart breaks for these guys. Mm-hmm. We all know how important sport is, not just to them, but to us. I think I've had 3 years since I was 10 years old that I didn't have football. And that was 3 years that I was working with a soccer team. And we can always say it's only sport, but sport's important. It's important to the psyche of our country. It's important to us. It's important to our kids. But at some point, I think we got to take a step back and do what's right for the health and welfare of our student athletes. And for all these coaches, they want to complain. They want to try to twist their words or the situation that our athletes are safest in our environment. Nobody said that the athletes have to go home. Nobody says they have to leave that athletic world. They can continue to work out like we are. They can continue to get medical care where they're used to with their athletic trainers, their team docs. They can continue to work out with their strength conditioning coaches. They continue to get their online tutoring, get their classwork done. They're not kicking them out of school if they don't play football this year. So I think that's an inappropriate thing for these big time coaches to say. I think that's all really I got to say. I mean, we all got to do our best, and at some point we have to take care of ourselves. A year ago I wasn't thinking about this. I was thinking about who's responsible for the mental health care of our athletic trainers who are overworked, or strength coaches that have 7 teams, and I wanted to work towards that, and now that's got put on the back burner. But everyone here on the side and everybody's thinking of who's taking care of us as the health professionals or that's involved with these athletes. And I don't know. I've mentioned that to our athletic director. I have 2 meetings with our athletic director, and I've said, you got to think about your support staff, the AT, strength staff, equipment staff who are down in the trenches. You can stay up on your 4th floor and be pretty safe. But we look at the athletes, and we should care for them the most. that's where we put our heart into making them better. But at some point, we've got to look after ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric, for all that. And thank you, everyone. And, hopefully we can maybe jump on another call in September and see where we're at with this stuff. But
Yeah, we got Saturdays free, so we can.
yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.
Take care.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.